Well, benefits, they're really important. They really, really are. And it's kind of close to my heart because of what I went through. And, you know, I have become I guess a line of duty benefit specialist, I guess, in my state. And I've, you know, worked with many survivors in my state as well as across the country, because we've passed several pieces of legislation to improve the benefits. So it's very important to me. And as I mentioned before, when I had my notification, really almost the first thing my mother-in-law brought up was the benefits. 3 weeks after the funeral, she said to me, this is verbatim, never forget these words, "You're young and pretty, you'll pull yourself up by the bootstraps, in 6 months you'll be over this, and in a year you'll be married. So I'm going to keep the $120,000 life insurance policy." And her big thing was she just assumed I would buy a house with it and then live in Keith's house, because it was his, insurance money from his death, with other men. So I'm not really sure if she thought I was going to open a brothel. But I was like, whatever. And for me, it was really important that I didn't want to dishonor Keith by fighting with his family or fighting over money. And I just said, you know his wishes, you do what you can live with. And she was very able to live with that decision. Which, it is what it is. But one of the things that I guess through my healing process is to make sure that I educate people about the need for paperwork. It's very important that you keep your paperwork up to date, because you don't want that to happen. If something happens to you, you want to make sure that the people who should be taken care of are taken care of, and your wishes are carried out. Okay, so when a death occurs, these 4 agencies, I guess, are who you should notify. Naturally, Concerns of Police Survivors at the top of the list, but we are able to provide much needed emotional, mental support through the chapter, through the national office, really connecting the survivors with a lifeline. So if you're able to forward us information on the survivors, that would be awesome. We can introduce them to the organization. Officer Down Memorial Page, ODMP. How many of you have heard of that page? Use that. Do you know how that page got started? No? It was a young man in college, and that was a college project, starting that page. And he was a real, techie guy. And after the class, he kept it up, and it really, he did not come from law enforcement, but Chris Cosgrove became a police officer. He just saw what law enforcement was, and I think he fell in love with the profession. And even though now he's a police officer in Virginia, he still has that page, and he runs it it's a nonprofit. He runs it off of donations. And that is actually the site that we use for all of our statistics. So that's just something for you to know. Their statistics are spot on. The Public Safety Officers Benefit Program, which we call PSOB, you want to notify them. And then the National Law Enforcement Officers Memorial Fund. That's the wall in DC. So there's no monetary benefit to the last one. There's no emotional benefit to the last one. That's purely honoring the officer. Okay. And just for you to know, you have time for the last one. They honor officers in a calendar year. So it's not like, and I just say this because a lot of agencies kind of put that first, which I think financially and emotionally having that support is a little bit more important than being put on the wall. So for an officer to be approved to be put on the wall, it takes a little bit of time. It's going to be, if an officer is killed in December, then it's May. So it's at least The least amount of time would be 5 months. Okay. So C.O.P.S, we do have an extensive database of benefits by state, and if it's not in your folder, it's on the flash drive, and you can also go to our website and you can pull up benefits by each state. So every state is different, so it's very hard to, for me to be a expert on every single state. Federally, I know those benefits very well. Not exactly sure about New York. I do know that your pension is a lifetime benefit. You can remarry and you won't lose that. Just so you know, the pension is also a tax exempt benefit federally. Not sure about in your state. But our website has an extensive listing, so take a look at that. So one of the liaison officer's duties is going to be dealing with benefits. Okay. So it is the department's responsibility to file all of the benefits and educate the surviving spouse or parents if there is no spouse, or children if there's no parents, no spouse, of what the benefits may be. So first you want to kind of get a spreadsheet, figure out what they may be eligible for, and kind of look at a ballpark figure of what that might be. Whenever you talk to the family about benefits, you always use the word possible. Don't promise anything. Because I will tell you, if you tell somebody you may be eligible for the PSOB benefit and they don't get it, they're going to say, well, thank you for trying. If you tell them, oh, this is cut and dry, this is definitely line of duty, you're going to get the PSOB benefit, and they don't get it, they're going to be angry. Well, you promised me, you told me. So everything is possible. You're not the person that makes that determination. I have seen cases where I would have said something was line of duty, and it got denied. I've seen cases where I would have sworn it was line of duty, and it got denied. So it's not up to you. I would also say, we're going to talk about a couple different types of benefits. Anything. If you hear of any benefit, file for it. Let that entity tell you whether or not they're eligible or not eligible. Like I said, I was very fortunate with my department. I had my liaison officer was awesome. He filed so many things for me, and things I never even heard of. And so I didn't get a lot of them, but I knew he was looking out for me, and I knew that whatever I was eligible for, he put me in for, or possibly eligible for. So you want to get as much information as you can about possible benefits. That's going to be pension, workman's comp, the PSOB, any type of life insurance through the agency, and of course health care. Okay, so do you have health care? Is that part of your state benefit here?
I'm not in New York City.
Depends on the department? Okay. And that's another thing with states. Sometimes the benefits can vary from department to department, and that gets really hard to know who's eligible for what. That's the one thing I really like about New Jersey. We have two different pension systems, the state police, and then we have the police and fire, and all of our benefits are pretty much the same all the way across the board, so everybody gets the same thing. It's really hard when you have somebody who is, your survivors in the same state and your departments are next to each other, but you don't get the same benefits. So it can make it very difficult. So I would get like a little spreadsheet together that you can leave with the family so they can know what to expect, what you're filing for. Your first meeting, there's certain documents you're going to need. You're going to need death certificate of the officer. You'll need marriage licenses. You might need divorce papers, and you may need birth certificates of children. You do want to find out if the surviving spouse is pregnant or there's a possibility they're pregnant, because then that child could be eligible for especially education benefits down the road if they're born after the officer, was killed. So that's something you want to ask. The second meeting, you're just checking in because do you have those documents yet? You're going to let them know where you're at with everything, what you filed for, what you're still waiting on. 45 days, the family, you really should have everything from the family. And within 2 months, everything should be filed. There's no reason why you can't get everything filed within 2 months. All right. And I would say, even with the PSOB, some of the things that they need might be a toxicology report, might be the accident or incident report, might be a letter from the department on department letterhead. Okay? If you're missing one of those, file it. I would say file it, let that claim get started, and you can send it in as you get it. So the public safety officer's benefit right now currently has a cost of living increase each year, and it's currently $389,825. This benefit was first instituted in 1976, and it was basically because the government placed that much value and appreciation on the officer for their sacrifice. And the benefit was originally $50,000. And then I want to say like 1987, 88, it went up to $100,000. And then right after 9/11, Bush increased it to $250,000 and added a cost of living increase. So it went up substantially. It is not eligible to military, as the military have other federal benefits. So this is just for law enforcement. Ooh. I think my battery died. One of these? Okay. Okay, here we go. So it's just for law enforcement, firefighters, EMTs. So there are a few entities that are eligible for that. Now this comes right out of the law. This is the definition of the act. Authorizes federal benefits for survivors of public safety officers whose deaths were a direct and proximate result of an injury sustained in the line of duty. So the underlined words that's really what they're looking at. That's how they're going to define whether or not it's line of duty. This is how they define a law enforcement officer. Sometimes there are law enforcement, agencies you may not consider law enforcement. Basically, it's like, do you have arrest capability? So they have their definition. I'm trying to think of a good example for you. We have law enforcement officers in colleges, okay? So if they have a college police department, you might think of that more as security. That's not necessarily, Do they carry a gun? Can they arrest people? That's the big thing. Can they arrest people? We have in some inner city areas, there are law enforcement officers in high schools. They're part of the school district. So these are things that you might not necessarily think of as a law enforcement officer. And I even had a survivor friend of mine worked in police records for a department, and we had a correction officer who was stabbed to death because he was moving an inmate, and the chief for her department wouldn't let anybody wear the black mourning bands because he swore that corrections weren't really law enforcement officers. So sometimes, it's I don't agree with that, and that was asinine, but sometimes people have this perception of what a law enforcement officer is. Okay, so your injury, It's a traumatic physical wound, and they cover all of these things fit within that. Now, this law has changed quite a bit over the years. Initially, some of these things were not covered. What it does not include is stress or strain. You know, stress, cumulative stress. So I'll explain that with a heart attack once we get there. Has to be sustained in the course of performance in the line of duty. Authorized commuting, I can give you an example of that. We had an officer who, he was a Fort Lee police officer. He did not live in town. As a matter of fact, he didn't even live in the right county, in the same county as where he worked. They called him in for a specific job. You know, he was called in to work. And as soon as he was called in, he was on the clock. So he was driving to work in his personal motorcycle and had an accident, not even in the same county. PSOB deemed that line of duty because of authorized commuting, because as soon as he was called in, they considered him to be on duty. Okay, so it didn't really matter. Like, you might look at that and say, well, he was on his way to work. He wasn't even in a police car. It wasn't even the same jurisdiction. So you might look at that and say, well, that's not line of duty. So a lot of times you have to ask questions, and heart attacks are one of those areas that can be a little gray, which we will definitely go over. Sometimes there's evidence that says, you know, the injury or the death resulted from the simply being a police officer. You know, if somebody was, we had an officer who was at a family picnic in Paterson, New Jersey. He was at a family picnic, and a couple guys right next door. And I don't know if you're familiar with Paterson, but houses are very close together. There was got some guys next door lighting off some fireworks, and at the time you couldn't even buy sparklers in New Jersey. They were all illegal. But he asked them to stop. They didn't stop because it was kind of close to the kids that were playing. He asked them to stop again. They didn't stop. He asked them a third time and identified himself as a police officer. They then beat him to death with a pipe. Because he identified himself as a police officer, the assumption is he was killed because of his status as a police officer. So that was line of duty. He's at a family picnic, but he identified himself as a police officer. We had another officer who worked as a security guard in Sears. And there was a robbery, and he was there, and he identified himself as a police officer, and then he was killed. The assumption is he was killed because he was a police officer. So again, sometimes things happen, and you might not think of that as line of duty. You might think, like, well, he wasn't working, you know? So if you can prove that he or she was killed because they were a police officer, they could be approved for this benefit. Okay, so we talked about that. So the public safety officer's benefit has had a couple changes over the year. After 9/11, as I said, they increased the benefit. They put a COLA on there, cost of living increase, and they also started covering chaplains. And if our two chaplains had stayed, they would know this. So that's important to know. If you have a chaplain who, you know, maybe was killed in a car accident or as Father Michael Judd, he was killed when the buildings came down, you know, they would be eligible for this benefit as well. They also changed the priority of the recipients. And then the Hometown Heroes Act, they made some changes again. That's where they started approving heart attacks and strokes. And basically how they're defining statement for what they will consider line of duty is non-routine, stressful, or strenuous physical activity or training. So as Brent had said earlier, and I'm sure you probably agree, most calls are not routine, right? Because you don't know what you're going to get, you know, so you could almost say everything is non-routine. So it leaves a lot of room. If somebody has a heart attack, definitely Definitely don't assume it's not line of duty, okay? If you, now you have to look, were they engaged in something stressful at work? Was it something strenuous? Training, sometimes some departments might mandate training. You know, were they jogging and it was extremely hot out and then they had a heart attack or stroke? Has to occur within 24 hours of that above activity. So in other words, let's say you have an officer who at 12 o'clock gets a call for a peaceful demonstration, aka riot. At 12 o'clock they get a call to break up a fight. And does that, clears that call, goes on another call, and 3 o'clock have a heart attack. Okay, and then, now would you consider that line of duty? Might be, right? Because they had a stressful, it was non-routine, right? You could say breaking up that fight, that's not routine. It was definitely stressful, it was definitely strenuous. Could very possibly, you know, be line of duty. Now let's say they have that incident, it's 12 o'clock, they have that incident. Go through the rest of the day, don't have any issues, right? Leaves work at 5 p.m., has off the next day, mowing the lawn in the morning, 11 a.m., they have a heart attack. Would you consider that line of duty? A lot of people would probably say no, but if you look at the definition, when did they have the non-routine, stressful, or strenuous activity? When was that call that they went on, that they broke up a fight? At 12. And then they had the heart attack at 11 a.m. It's within 24 hours, right? Okay. Now let's say they have the heart attack, but they don't die. They hang on for another 2 days and then they die. Would that be considered line of duty? Yeah, because they had the heart attack within 24 hours. They don't have to die, they have to have that heart attack within that 24 hours. So my advice is, if you have an officer who has a heart attack, look at the last 24 hours, look at all their calls, what did they go on, what did they do? I guarantee you, even if it's something like they went on call from, and the calls were maybe not anything huge. We have 5 minutes? Wow. Okay, the calls were not anything huge, but it was back to back to back. That's stressful. Okay, so definitely something to think of. And as with everything, you want to make sure that you are not promising anybody anything, possible benefits. Mandatory wear, basically, we had some departments that were creating policy because they were not issuing mandatory seatbelt or vest because they didn't want officers to lose out on receiving this benefit. So the C.O.P.S said, okay, we don't care what your department policy is, and we don't care if they have a vest on, and we don't care if they wear a seatbelt, we'll still approve them. Okay, so that doesn't, because we were getting officers that if the department, you could have two officers, very similar situation, both of them killed because they did not wear their seatbelt, but one department had a policy, so they wouldn't get the benefit, but the other one would because the department didn't have a policy. So that's why the C.O.P.S made this. Eligible survivors, I'm going to go through this really quickly. Basically, it's going to be the widow or widower, okay, comes first, then the children, if they have both a spouse and underage children, they get it in equal shares. If there's no spouse but underage children, they get the policy in equal shares. And you can see where the children, if they're in school or they have a physical disability, the age can be a little higher than 18. If there's no spouse, If there's no children, what they do is they look at your PSOB designation form. Okay, so basically you can say who you want to get this benefit if you didn't have a spouse or if your children were grown. Children aren't in school, they're 25, they work full time. You could make them your designee, okay? If there's not a PSOB designation form, they will look at the last fully exit life insurance policy on file with the agency and that person. So we had an officer who died in the line of duty. His father was not married, didn't have kids, okay? His father was on the life insurance policy. His father committed suicide 3 months before the officer was killed. The officer's mother, all then went to the officer's mother, a woman he hadn't seen in 20 years. So again, keep your paperwork up to date. If there's no beneficiary, if there's no life insurance policy, no PSOB designation form, then it would go to parents and equal shares. If your parents are not alive, it would go to any adult children. If you don't have any adult children, it does not get paid to the state, it does not get paid out. Okay. So some possible reasons for denial: intentional misconduct or suicide. So you can't just kill yourself and think your family's going to benefit. Voluntary intoxication. I mean, maybe you're undercover and you had to drink so you didn't blow your cover, because they run a toxicology report, and if they see something, they'll excuse that. If an officer was doing something negligent, if the claimant contributed to the officer's death. So if I killed my husband, I'm not going to get it. Okay, and a military death, because they have other benefits for the military. There's also an educational assistance program with this. This is an important thing that a lot of people don't know about. If you have somebody that is involved in, maybe they're detached to a federal unit, or maybe they were killed because the crime committed was terrorist in nature or crime committed against the U.S., they may file for federal workman's comp. They may be eligible for that, okay? So this is a big thing that a lot of people don't know about. You have your state and local benefits. We talked about that. You know, there's different things that you may be eligible for. Look in the packet. There's lots of other benefits. Did you know the Social Security will pay for the funeral? Did you know that? $250, because that's what a funeral cost in 1920. And that's it. But if you have children, you can collect Social Security. So there's other benefits. Any of these fraternal type of organizations, they have different things. So look around, do your due diligence, see what's around in your community, anything that supports law enforcement. Find out if they, the 200 clubs, 100 clubs, they will all give the family usually a pretty substantial donation within 24, 48 hours that's designed to get the family through the funeral and until maybe $5,000, $10,000, depends on the club and where they're at, but that will get them through the point till the paychecks or the money is the benefits are approved and the checks are coming. Okay, because it takes a while sometimes to get everything approved. I mean, you figure if you're taking 2 months to file all the paperwork for the pension, what does that mean? Family's not getting a paycheck for 2 months. That's what that means. So it's really important. NRA, if you're killed by gunfire and you're an NRA member, they have a $25,000 policy. There's lots of other things you should think about. They should update their paperwork. They should get a good tax accountant or attorney, definitely, because some of these benefits are tax-free. So why pay taxes if you don't have to? And then, again, C.O.P.S. I mean, you can give people all the money in the world, but really, that's not going to heal them. It's going to make life a little easier for them, that they can not worry about their bills. They can be there for their children. But C.O.P.S is the organization that's really going to be there for them and help them with their grieving process, help them emotionally. So please pull your chapters in, go to national, and let us be there for you.